Have you ever had a moment where everything just clicked, where you lost track of time, felt completely present, and performed at your best without overthinking? Yet maybe those moments feel rare. Maybe, like so many of us, you spend more time in your head, second guessing yourself, trying to prove you belong, or pushing harder just to keep up. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. This week, I talked with Tom Roberts, retired dentist, race car driver, longtime Buddhist practitioner, and author of the upcoming book From Fear to Flow, about what it really means to be in a flow state and what gets in our way. Tom shares how racing helped him recognize the role ego plays in self doubt, why imposter syndrome is often just fear in disguise, and how getting into flow isn't about effort, it's about awareness. We also talk about how childhood messages shape our adult identity, why perfectionism is a form of self protection, and what it means to reclaim who you really are underneath all the noise. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Tom. It's so great to have you here today. I'd love to start by inviting you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thanks, Kim. It's really nice of you to invite me to this. I love this subject. I was a dentist for 35 years, and I sold my practice in 2019, and gave myself some. Obviously, it was COVID came right after that, but I've raced cars for decades, off and on, and decided that I wanted to get better in my retirement. And so a friend of mine suggested I read a book by a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which took me a long time to learn how to say his name properly. His book on flow states, and I didn't know anything about it. So I started reading this book and going, "Oh my God, this is exactly what I need," because it improves performance. I've also been a Buddhist for about 25, 30 years, and I've been going to Nepal for that period of time doing dentistry in a monastery over there. And as I started reading this book and started learning more and more about flow, I went, wait a minute, this is really similar to Buddhism, and nobody's talking about it.
Interesting.
All right, so what really is a flow state? And so long story short, for the past 4 years, I've been writing a book. The book's called From Fear to Flow, and it basically is what is flow, what gets in the way of flow, the ego, and then how to deal with that. So, the imposter syndrome is just another name for the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so, your subject is fascinating to me. It's like I've been living this for 4 years. And at the same time, who am I to talk about this? I have no degree in psychology. I have no degree in neuroscience. And yet I'm diving into this thing and coming up with some ideas that have really kind of changing the paradigm of what a flow state is. And so it's been a fantastic journey, fascinating journey, sometimes a terrifying journey,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really new stuff. And trying to go off on my own a little bit and sort of redefine flow states and come up with a different model of what this thing is. Again, who am I to say this? And yet it's resonating with people. So it's been, like I said, a really fascinating journey.
So, first of all, congratulations on learning how to pronounce his name, because I have never been.
I had to go online. There's a guy that actually does it. It's a 20-second thing. It's like, yeah, it was an interesting. Yeah.
But I'd love to hear more, because I know that there are probably a lot of people listening who have different understandings of what is meant by flow and a flow state. And I'd love to hear your interpretation of that. What does that mean to you?
It has been for 50 years. Csikszentmihalyi basically went out and did research on what made people happy. And interviewed hundreds, thousands of people and consistently heard from them that when I'm in this flow state, I feel like my life is, they didn't say flow state because the name didn't exist. When I'm doing what I love, I feel like I'm flowing through life. And so he coined the term flow and it kind of stuck. Now he has his definition of what a flow state is. It's kind of this peak experience. But one of the really fascinating things about flow states is this uh, term is called transient hypofrontality. It's a great cocktail party term. Literally means transient, obviously temporary. Hypo means down. Frontality means your frontal lobe shuts off. In other words, the part that in your brain that has your ego shuts off. So my flow state comes from racing cars. And it, for years, I would get into this place and not know it and not know what it is and what do you do with it? Um, but what is really interesting about it is that if the ego shuts off from a Buddhist standpoint, the only thing that is left is you.
Mhm.
So my conclusion is not that this flow state is some special place that only hyper athletes can get into or musicians or whatever, but we all get into it to some degree or another. And Csikszentmihalyi actually said that in his book, that it is not some really special place. It has been kind of pumped up to be this great place that we have to strive to get to, but it really isn't. It's who we are. So that has been a bit of a paradigm shift in writing about it. It is if it's who we are, and again, from a Buddhist standpoint, you're there right now, but stuff gets in the way, and that stuff is our ego. And our ego is a collection of thoughts, habits to protect us from whatever it needs to protect us from. So in the end, it isn't real. It's just a bunch of habits. So if you can overcome these habits, then naturally you're going to drop into this thing that we've labeled a flow state.
So I love that frame of, the ego getting in the way. I think about that a lot. You mentioned imposter syndrome is just another name for ego. I think about that too. Of there are various manifestations of fear and self-protection that we all use in moments where we're feeling threatened or, defensive of ourselves. And so I'm curious, like, I guess I have a couple of questions I'm thinking about as it relates to flow, because I think there are probably people who are out there now thinking, I've never been in that, or I'm not aware of having been in that. How do I find that state, right? Would you say that there is a way in which, until it's brought to our attention, we don't realize that we're capable of that, or that we've engaged in that before, and that, in order to find or more consistently get
Mhm.
there, it's a matter of understanding what are some of these barriers that get in the way.
The first thing I ask people, obviously, I've been doing nothing but flow stuff for the past 4 years and learning about it and talking to people about it. And if I ask people, have you ever been in a flow state? They look at me like, I don't know. And I said, have you ever done anything where you looked up after a while and realized that hours had gone by and it doesn't, you just go, where did the time go by? You're in a flow state.
Mm.
You're hyper focused. Flow state is about focus. And the more you can focus on something, and it usually is something that we really enjoy doing, but you can get in a flow state washing the dishes if you really want to get down and say, okay, it's squeaky clean, like, and really focus in. Flow comes from focus.
Mm.
So if you can nurture things, be it meditation, be it whatever it is that can improve your focus, your tendency to get into a flow state increases. And flow state is a spectrum. It's been written about as if it's almost an on-off switch, like I'm out of flow, now I'm in flow. It's not quite like that. I think it's more of a spectrum because when I race cars, I can get into a flow state. And then if something comes, our helmets have or have microphones and earphones in them. So somebody can get on and say, you're the next person you need to pass is 30 seconds ahead. And I start making a strategy for it. I come out of a certain type of flow state, but I'm in a different type of flow state. So it evolves. And so that's why I say it's on a spectrum, just like focus is on a spectrum. Sometimes you can get distracted a little bit and be out of your focus. Flow state will decrease. It may shut off. You may not be in a flow state. But it's like, when is it on? When is it off? If you look at it more as a spectrum, then it makes more sense.
And is it something that, and I don't want to use the word should here because it implies that there's one right way to do it, but is it is it something that we should aspire to experience more often? Does it make sense that we're not in flow 100% of the time? Right?
Active inflow. So so there's a couple different ways of answering that question. One is to answer from the traditional sense of, flow, your performance, productivity goes up in flow states. They've even done measurements where supposedly, I don't know how you measure this, but productivity goes up 5 times. Now, that's been something that has really sold flow to the corporate, because obviously the corporates want everybody in a flow state so they're more productive. But yeah, it's Csikszentmihalyi in his research showed that you are happier if you're in a flow state.
Mm.
Now, if you take it from where I've been going with this, is by saying flow state is you're experiencing your natural state, who you truly are, because your ego is at least partially shut off. Well, the only thing left is you. So of course you're going to be happier because you're you.
Hmm.
It's the ego typically starts developing, well, when we're born to some extent, because when you have a body, you have an ego. Um, and an ego is basically protection of this, the I, who I am, from you, who are trying to get what I have. But it goes beyond that. So if you're a young kid, say you're in your 5 or 6 years old, and you're told you're stupid, in that age, you can't say, well, that's just your opinion. You have to believe what they tell you because your survival depends on them. People say, well, we all want to get love from our parents. Reality is we want our parents to love us so they'll feed us.
Yes.
So it's an existential terror that we're going to die if we don't adapt to what they want us to be. That means we have to give up what we are and create something new to take its place so that they'll be happy with us. Well, unfortunately, that new thing is our ego and it's not authentic. And then we're always trying to be something that we're not. Well, that doesn't work. And we all do it. Everybody does. Everybody I know that does it, except a few Tibetan lamas who didn't. But, that's so rare. But if you start to understand the mechanics of it, then you can backtrack it. And the trick is to start catching the thoughts going through your head. So here I am writing a book on flow states. And throughout this process, even now as I'm sitting here, I'm going, who are you to talk about this? You don't know what you're talking about. Well, I do have a certain perspective that I can offer to people. That's reality. And people are interested in talking to somebody who's been in a race car because it's really visceral flow state. So yeah, I have stuff to offer people. Some people, not everybody. That's reality. But our brain says you have to be popular with everybody and you have to be right on the money and you have to be an expert even when you're not an expert.
Yes.
So it's really destructive. It's really, but if you don't catch those thoughts, then you can't go, wait a minute, is that really true?
Mm.
So it's the trick is, and this is where, the practice of Buddhism. Buddhism is not a religion, it's a mind science. People think it's like, oh, we're worshiping thing. No, we're trying to understand how this thing works. That's what Buddhism is. And so the trick is to become the witness and you step back away from it and go, okay, that's what this message is giving me. Is it true? And I mean, you can ask all kinds of questions. What does that do for me? What is it trying to protect me from?
Mhm.
I can give you an example. I was in a race 2 years ago at a track called Spa in Belgium. And I'd been racing in the United States for a couple of years with a group, and we decided to take it up a notch. and go to this track called Spa. Spa is one of the most famous tracks in the world, and it also has a series of corners called Eau Rouge that is one of the most dangerous series of corners in the world. So I get there, and the garage that we're in has four different cars. These are really high-end Porsches. And I'm looking around, and all these people are speaking German. I'm going, oh my God, I'm not in Kansas anymore. And I'm thinking, well, these guys are, I'm older. I'm an older driver. I'm fast for an older driver, but these guys are going to realize that I have no business being here. So I get in the car and I know how to get into flow state. I've been studying flow for years and I know how to do this, but I get in the car trying to prove to them that I belong. That's ego. Because if you're trying to prove to them you belong, you don't believe you belong.
Mhm.
You're trying to prove it wrong. I went out. This is practice. We had a 12-hour race coming up. This is just practice. And I stuffed the car into the wall, trying to prove to them that I belonged. In doing so, I validated my message that I don't belong.
Yes.
And so I went back into the pits, and the car wasn't badly damaged, fortunately. But everybody's saying, oh, it's okay, shake it off, it happens. But I'm sitting there going, what did you just do? You jeopardized an entire weekend where people have paid huge amounts of money to drive this car, trying to prove that you belong. That's imposter syndrome in racing.
Absolutely.
So, long story short, I realized that I still had an entire race to run with these people. I had to shake it off and I had to find something. So the next time I went out, I got to go back out and practice. I said, okay, you know how to, you haven't driven this car a lot and you've driven this track a lot. Build into this like you know how to do it. Get into a flow state because that's when you're going to be the fastest. In other words, being you and building into this, you're going to be the quickest. Stop trying. And I set the fastest lap time I did for the entire weekend.
Mm.
So proving to them that I did belong, but not trying to prove to them I belonged.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the weird contradiction of this whole egoic thing dealing with your ego, because the ego in the end is not your friend anymore. And people always say to me, well, okay, I need to stop the ego. Good luck. You
Mm.
can't stop the ego. All
No.
you do is witness it. If you try to stop it, you're using the ego to stop it. So you're just perpetuating it. And again,
Yes.
it's an interesting
Well, and
contradiction.
I always say that, our ego is a feature, not a bug, right? It's not something we should be trying to get away from or fix. It's managing it, right? Because it's built into our DNA for the reasons that you talked about. It's keeping us alive in many ways. It's keeping us alert, but it can overreact and it can interfere with other types of activities. So the awareness of when that's showing up and the choices that we make in response to it, I think are what is most important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a very famous Tibetan, not Tibetan, he was a Zen monk that lived in the Bay Area. He's one of the first guys to bring Buddhism, a guy named Suzuki Roshi. And he was asked, how much ego do we need? And he said, enough so you don't step out in front of a bus.
Hmm. Hmm.
You keep yourself safe. Now, have the common sense to look where you're going, to just common sense. But the stuff beyond that, we don't function from our ego, but we think our thoughts are who we are, not what we're thinking. So if you can start to undo that, you literally you're uncovering and allowing who you truly are to reemerge, and functioning from that place is not only more efficient, more productive, it's also more satisfying and way more creative. You want to be creative. I did a race, 25-hour race. There were four of us. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't sleep when you do these big races. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm walking around the paddock and I realized I was still a dentist at the time and I'm solving problems for my practice that I had not been able to figure out. They were dropping like that. And that lasted for 3 days, that super creativity. It's like if you look at like Michael Jackson, he even said, I don't write my music, I download it.
Mm.
Well, if you're going to do that, you have to be pretty clean and pretty open. So, it's like the ego, yes, it's there to protect us. Unfortunately, it tries to protect us from things that don't exist. as an adult.
Well, and can I ask you a question of so this is complicated because a lot of people are in work environments where they feel like they have to prove themselves or they're going to lose their job. That's the perception. It may not be true, but that's the perception, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's a hyper competitive environment. Maybe you have a critical manager. Maybe you've got a lot of really smart people around you, and there's that feeling of, I need to measure up to my colleagues. And we are never 100% expert in anything that we're doing. There's always learning that's involved. And so I wonder, how does learning fit into flow, given that it's inherently more clunky? It's like, we're aware of what we don't know. And then when you add to the learning process, the self-doubt that comes with that, right? Is it simply a matter of noticing? Like, what would you say in response to that?
Well, I mean, it's okay. Let's say you take up a new thing. You're going to learn how to play tennis.
Mhm.
So right now you're an absolute rank beginner. Um, you're obviously not going to get into a flow state. So as you practice and hit the ball against a wall or something like that, you start to build up some experience. And as you gain experience, then you can become more focused, you can become more engaged in what you're doing, and you can therefore drop into a flow state. So, I did not come from corporate. I do understand the motivation of having to appear competent,
Mhm.
but you also can't fake it. So, I think, and I think you talked about this in your TED Talk as well, which is really excellent, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, I think that the idea of approaching this from a growth mindset and being open and curious is the best approach, and being authentic. It's like if you don't know something, say, gosh, I don't know that. I need to check that out and learn. So the process of trying to fake it, you always say fake it until you make it. That doesn't really work. It's
Mhm.
like be authentic. And if you don't know something, say, gosh, I don't know that. I need to learn about that. I'm not sure. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, you are, because you're making me think about this from two ways too. I think so. There's the ego component that says you have to be perfect, and if you're not, then people are going to judge you, and you're going to something horrible is going to happen, right? But that's in some instances, maybe the environment is structured in such a way that that is not an unrealistic conclusion. Where in others, that's a story we're telling ourselves. And so I think part of it is recognizing where your own mindset and the ego, as you describe it, is holding us back, and where maybe we're just in the wrong environment. Maybe we are not set up
Yeah.
for the kind of success that you're talking about because we have, sort of toxic forces that are preventing it from being possible to go into flow.
Yeah. And realize that it's really easy to sit here and say, well, then you should move. And I mean, that's probably what you should do, but
Eventually, yes.
to do it immediately. So it's like I think one of the most important things is that are the thoughts going through your head kind?
Mhm.
If they're not, then they're not your thoughts for starters.
Mhm.
Somebody else gave them to you. We don't come up with negative. I mean, kids don't fall down and go, oh, I can't believe I just fell down. What an idiot. They get back up and they do it again and again and again and again without beating themselves up. We learn to beat ourselves up. So if we are beating ourselves up, it isn't our thoughts. Most of the thoughts that we have came from somebody else. There's someone else's opinion, basically. Now, as a kid, I said, you have to accept the opinion because you're young and you rely on these people to survive. As an adult, you don't have to, but you still have to catch them.
Mhm.
And, are we going to stay on autopilot and keep doing this to ourselves? I think mindset is huge. If you have a growth mindset, it's about curiosity and learning and growing and never really arriving. I think, perfectionism is a negative. It comes from negativity. It comes from a belief that you are not valuable and that you have to so overcompensate. And the only way of doing that is to be perfect. It's impossible. It doesn't exist. To be competent, to be improving, yeah, that's all very realistic and very kind. I think it really has to start there. So I think if we need to, again, to start turning inward and going, okay, is what I'm telling myself a kind thing to say? Would I say that to my friend? Would I say that to my sibling? Probably
Mm.
not, but we beat ourselves up like crazy.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to say it too, that they're not our own thoughts. Uh,
No, they're absolutely not. They're opinions. Just
yes.
thoughts are opinions. And unfortunately, we equate our thoughts to who we are instead of what we're thinking. If you watch a thought, and this is Buddhist stuff, it comes, it exists, it goes. If you don't grab it, but we grab it, and then we make a whole story around it. And if we start to back up to it, so one of my things growing up was whether or not I was competent. That was something that was handed to me by one of my parents and basically saying that I wasn't. So I realized that through racing, which is one of the great crucibles, because it's got immediate feedback, is that I was battling this idea that I wasn't and constantly trying to prove it wrong. Well, that's a filter that you're working through that does not help. It seems like it does because it makes me try harder. But you don't excel at what you're doing by trying. You excel by allowing and opening. It comes from such a different place. And that's when creativity can blossom. So, I think again to start stepping back and listening to what the thoughts, the messages that we're giving ourselves. We can find ourselves in a bad situation, corporate situation, and it can be toxic, but we're such a part of it that we don't realize that this is not healthy for us.
Mhm.
You start stepping back and you start going, well, wait a minute, that person is really not being very nice to me. Do I want to stay in this environment? Once you bring awareness into it, then you start having a higher bar for how you interact with people. And you start taking better care of yourself. And then the new things start showing up that allow you to do that. It's this weird magical things that happens. And I hate to keep going back to flow. Flow is a problematic word in some ways, but just to your natural being it's an evolution of finding who you truly are and allowing that to be expressed and having the guts to do it. That is not an easy path. Because
Mm.
to see it, you have to go through the fear and terror that you are trying to avoid by creating this new persona. But the reward is you get yourself back.
Well, in what you're describing too, and this varies from individual to individual, is that from the day you are born, there are influencers around you that are trying to shape you into something else.
Oh, absolutely. Just watch
Right?
advertising. It's like,
Yes,
do this
exactly.
and you'll be wonderful, be the Marlboro Man. Smoke this and you'll be, yeah.
Yes. And our parents' values are imposed upon us and societal norms around what's appropriate and what isn't. And so it's really hard to even figure out at the core of everything, who am I? Right? What is the essence of who I am and my unexpressed self? And I think that's probably the another important element of the work before you can even start to shift out of the ego to really kind of think about, well, who would I be without my ego? And I don't know that people have had a lot of experience.
But the beauty of it is you don't have to figure it out.
Mm,
It'll just, it's like remove the obstacle and it naturally comes out because
mm,
it's there right now in all of us. It doesn't go away. It just gets covered up.
yeah.
Uncover it, and all of a sudden there it is. And it sometimes I look at what's emerging, go, wow, that's really cool. I can't believe that's who I truly am. But I mean, the process has just been incredibly rewarding. I can't even express how cool it is to start rediscovering who I truly am.
Mm. And so you mentioned that you have your own struggles when it comes to writing a book of who am I to write the book. How do you, practically speaking, manage that and continue to stay focused on the
You
book?
just, I think with writing a book, you just have to keep doing it.
Mm.
Um, if, there were many times I just wanted to stop because it's so frustrating sometimes. And then you make these little breakthroughs and go, oh, that makes sense. And you just keep going. And in like anything creative, it's an evolution. It's not all of a sudden you start painting a great painting or writing a great piece of music. It's an evolution. Beethoven's early stuff compared to his late stuff, I mean, he transformed himself. He became deaf, but he still wrote his greatest music at the end of his life. I mean, just
Mm.
incredible pieces. So it's like it's a process. It's not all of a sudden you need to be an expert. I mean, my book will come out here in a few months, and I have no doubt a year later I'm going to want to change it because I've evolved
Mhm.
the reality of things. It's like trust the process, don't give up. And the hard times come as you're starting to change, and it's not comfortable sometimes. Stick
Mm.
with it, get through it, trust the process.
Yeah, I think that's a really great reminder too, that being uncomfortable is kind of part of the process, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, gosh, I love this conversation, Tom. I think you bring such an important angle to the whole conversation around imposter syndrome and what gets in our way. And I'm eager for your book to come out. Where can people find you if they're interested in following you and staying connected to your
This has
work?
all been evolving right now. TomRoberts.me is my website, and you can go on and learn a few things. And again, we're all kind of putting this together because the book hasn't come out yet, but it comes out in January. So there'll be launch announcements and all kinds of things for when the book finally comes out.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure that the website is in the show notes for anybody who wants to stay up to date on when that is happening. And thank you so much for being here and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for giving me the time, Kim. It's been great.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.